Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As well, a lot of us approach midlife, we find a large disconnection beginning to happen between us and the rest of the world. There's that sense of longing and loss as we try to find a reconnection to ourselves. We get busy with our tumultuous lives day to day, going to work, settling careers, dealing with children and grandchildren as well. The best thing some of us can actually do is maybe just go out and sit under a tree and just become quiet. Maybe kind of get back to ourselves and find out what that is and what that longing is that we find ourselves missing. On the program today, we have a wonderful guest who is author of the book Journey to the Sacred Mountains. It's Awakening Your Soul in Nature. And what I'd like to do is welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Mr. Flynn Johnson. Flynn, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Thank you for having me, Dana.
Now, I really enjoy what you've written here because it gets to not just Native American roots, but you also kind of blend Eastern mysticism as well into what you've written here. Tell us about how you got started on this journey.
For many, many years before I started to do the Vision Quest work, I immersed myself in different religious disciplines, practices, studied extensively in Eastern mysticism and Buddhism, read extensively, and had a meditation practice. So I've always been asking the big questions, and trying to figure things out and exploring different possibilities out there.
Now, in your story here, you actually share a Native American story throughout the book, which is about a mouse. And this was actually a neat story because I hadn't heard this before, but what I loved about it was its simplicity, but at the same time its depth. Share a little bit with our listeners what this story is.
The story of Jumping Mouse is a ancient Sioux teaching story, and it's told to teach the value of going on a vision quest to find out who and what you truly are. And the vision quest is going out to the hill, as they say in Native culture, for 4 days and nights on a solo fast. And you, as they say, cry for a vision. You throw yourself on your knees, so to speak, before Great Spirit and ask for guidance about who you are and what you have to give to the world.
Now, describe what exactly a vision quest is.
Well, the prototype for the vision quest is the passage from childhood to adulthood. Mm-hmm. And virtually, universally, indigenous cultures have formal rites of passage ceremonies to mark, honor, and celebrate the significance of this passage. They saw it as a second birth, literally. And so the whole community was looking forward to the event and then celebrating the event when the young people come back off the hill. The ceremony was not only just for the young people, but it helped the adults, and those working with the young people to renew their own connection to spirit and to celebrate that connection.
Now, in this book here, one of the things that really is glaringly true, especially in modern industrialized societies, is what we've tended to, I suppose, get away from is rites of passage and initiations. And this here seems to be something that really, I think, when it comes, especially, let's just use America, for example, as someone approaches, into their midlife, they kind of feel that crisis, so to speak, because we don't really have rites of passage per se, or, mm-hmm. initiations. And
right.
You can see why that's so important. Describe what that is so people get a better understanding. What we're kind of missing here.
What it is for young people or for people in this
I think
life?
it's for us in general in industrialized societies that we
Okay.
just don't have these things.
Well, I think it's really a necessary passage. It's necessary to bring a greater awareness to the event and to honor that passage, because for many young people the passage can be tumultuous. It was for me. It was a difficult passage, and when I think back on it, I think, wow, things might have been much easier for me if I had an elder come to me and say, all the questions that you're asking yourself right now, those are the important questions, and they need to be asked. And you're on a quest right now. You're on a quest to discover your place in the universe. That would have really helped me a lot, I think. And indeed, that was part of the motivation that led me into this work, so that I could tell a young person that was struggling, hey, you're not weird, you're not crazy, you're asking all the right questions. I believe that the rite of passage is an archetypal blueprint within our psyches, hardwired in our psyches, and that there's a calling in us, a longing in us to go through this initiation and to clearly mark that passage from childhood into adulthood. In our culture, we don't have that for the most part. I mean, I know that there are some ceremonies, religious ceremonies, that are used to mark that. But from my eyes, they don't really match the power of these indigenous passages, where the young person is really tested and they can really go deep, dig deep, and connect with strengths and resources they may not have known that they had. So the elders would meet these people and say, you're not crazy. The questions you're asking are real, and now we're going to put you out alone on the hill, and you can connect with a great spirit and get a vision of your destiny. And that's powerful medicine for traditionally it was very powerful medicine to do this. And often young people got what they call their medicine name out of this. It wasn't the name given to them by their parents, but the name that emerged from their connection, deeper connection with spirit and the earth.
Now, what's interesting when we go back to the story of the jumping mouse is that he comes across a frog who simply suggests for him to jump high into the air. And what's really interesting about that is that jumping mouse gets the opportunity to see and experience something that he was unaware even existed. And I think sometimes as children, as we grow, that we get patterned into our lives. We go to school, then after that, we're just expected to, maybe in some cases, go to college, and then find a career. Then there's marriage, and you spend a whole lot of time really pleasing your elders, so to speak, without really having a real connection about who you are. Those rare circumstances are those when someone, even a young child, becomes somehow enlightened, like something just comes from left field, and they start asking the hard questions that probably a lot of children just don't. Yeah. And so when you talk about, this rite of passage, for instance, to kill the young child to become an adult, I remember talking to my mother one time, and I said, I really don't know when I went from being a child to being an adult. I just knew all of a sudden here I'm relating with adults, they're relating back to me as an adult, but I didn't really feel any kind of a shift whatsoever. Yeah. And you can see when, people can have that kind of feeling like, okay, so what's the threshold and what am I supposed to be doing at this point?
Yeah, well, how many of us have actually been initiated in our Western culture?
Exactly.
And the people that come out that are in midlife transition on my programs, they're right there. They've never been initiated, but they're longing for that kind of experience. That kind of, either to deepen their connection to God, spirit, nature, whatever they call it, or to renew that connection, to establish that connection. And when you were speaking there, what I'm reminded of is that the Jungian psychologist Robert Johnson says that many teenagers have this kind of opening to spirit, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't have the mentors or the elders to bring that opening to affirm it and say, hey, you just had a vision of spirit or God. That's something beautiful, and you need to nurture that and cultivate that. I mean, that was my experience, personal experience. And many people that come out on my Vision Quest programs have also experienced those kind of openings when they're like 13, 14, 15, and into the teenage years.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the jumping mouse, this really actually began to elicit questions that were much deeper than the pattern that jumping mouse was used to, but there was a real significance to why it was the frog, and why is that?
Oh, the frog is really a shaman. Mm-hmm. The frog has the gift that the shamans have, which is to move between worlds, to move between the visible world and the invisible world, everyday life and spirit, and to bring medicine from the spirit world into the everyday world for healing. So it's really appropriate that frog is right there at the river of life, and he tells Jumping Mouse to get down as low as he can and then jump as high as he can. And when Jumping Mouse does that, as you know, he has a vision of the sacred mountains. That's like the first opening that I was just talking about, that we can have when we're younger.
Now, as Jumping Mouse goes on the journey, as he's wakened to see, hey, there's a much bigger world out there, he begins to run into, I guess you could call that this sort of a spiritual trap. You know, at first you're kind of have this romantic idea about what you've experienced. You need to go out into the world to try to affirm that what you've experienced is valid and real.
Yeah.
But then you find yourself running into, for instance, someone as he did, of this comfortable mouse living under this bush, having everything they want, safety and security, but there's no sense of real expression of personal realization, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, as you know, that chapter, I call it the old mouse, the failure of imagination. And he represents that part of us that denies the reality of the spiritual quest, of spirit itself, you know, and just wants to amass as much material comfort as he can. You know, there's a key line in that story where Jumping Mouse says to the old mouse, he says, "Oh, this is such a wonderful place you have here, and I bet you the eagles can't even see you here." And with that, and old mouse says, "Yes, they can't see me here, but I can see all the beings of the prairies and name them." Oh, and what it means that he can't see the eagles, or the eagles can't see him there, is that he's hidden himself away from. He's in denial of the ego part of himself, the part that represents the highest realization of awareness, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with that. And he tells Jumping Mouse later on that, yes, I've seen the great river that you've gone to, but the great mountains, the sacred mountains, that's just a myth. Forget it. Stay here with me. There's everything you could possibly ever want or need. And we've all, at one time or another, felt the seduction of the material world like that, I think, probably.
I think what's powerful about that, too, Flynn, is when you say it's the loss of imagination, is that as children, we have that. We simply have what comes into our minds, and we act on it. You know, we don't think about risks, for instance, or have we had a lifetime of experiences of disappointment where we say, well, it's safer to not take the risk than it is to take it and feel the pain if we fail. Yeah. And certainly, you know, as people approach midlife and they're not doing that enough, they tend to kind of put maybe material things in the way and see whether or not they weigh and measure up against the status quo, whether it's a neighbor, whatever the case may be, and settle for less than who they are. Now, why can that really be deadly?
Whoa, that's the question, isn't it, Mike?
It is, because I was going to lead to the point where we start talking about, for instance, the actual vision quest you had with real people, and they began to realize, where have I sold myself out here?
Right.
And they begin to realize the preciousness of not just life, but what the spiritual journey really means to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's deadening to the soul. When you deny the soul, deny spirit, for the sake of whatever, fame, wealth, whatever compromises you make. If you deny that part of yourself, that soul part of yourself, that imaginative reality that can see beyond just the merely material plane of existence, then you're really killing yourself, at a soul level, at a psychological level. And you become, as many people have said, you become the walking dead, sleepwalking through life. And the juice is gone. How many people do you know that are 40, 50, whatever, and the juice is gone? They've made all the compromises. They've conformed. As one friend many years ago said to me, I made a compromise and I've accepted mediocrity. And to me, that's like a knife into your spirit.
Now, what's interesting about the jumping mouse is he really begins to say, I've had enough of this nonsense. I'm not going to settle for less than what I've experienced. I want to explore more of this.
Yeah.
He begins to call them aids or guides, if you will, and each one takes him to a new level. And that's the beauty about the spiritual journey, that if people would have the courage to take it, they would actually find these things come into place. It's almost like, I'll give you an example of what I mean. Back in the 80s, for some reason, I had, call it a spiritual awakening to explore Zen, okay? And so what was interesting is the place that I was working had an inspector then who was one of these kind of guys that seemed to know about everything, and you really enjoyed talking with him, so I figured, okay, and I want to go and I'm going to talk with this guy. I don't know what this is, but I want to see what direction I can go to explore this the best way that I can. And, of course, he was just wonderful about doing this for me.
Wow,
then he decided to quit, and here's what was interesting. I thought, who am I going to talk with now? Well, what was interesting was a couple of months before that had happened, the company had actually hired this Japanese woman to work in this particular department. And all of a sudden, just one day, I struck up a conversation. This was probably within a week or two after he had left. And she says, well, yeah, actually, I practice my form of Japanese Zen, which is in archery. And it was amazing because I was just reading Zen and the Art of Archery by Eugene Herrigel at the time. As we began to talk further, she says, how would you like to experience a Japanese tea ceremony? And I thought, you got to be kidding me. This just could not be happening. But here it was in the same backyard, but it was because I had a yearning to explore this, that all those right things come into place. Now, Jumping Mouse from that bush had a long journey to the sacred mountain. And, of course, that can be kind of dangerous in and of itself, being a mouse with eagles or birds of prey. But he then had this buffalo, this sick buffalo. And there it was, And you talk really wonderfully about the give and the take, especially the giveaway, so to speak, and why it was really important for not just Native American cultures, but when you explore the traditions of cultures around the world, indigenous cultures, they understood this law of the giveaway because it was about everything giving, that it just is a constant circle. And it's something I think we've gotten away from.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with you. And I think the giveaway is the heart, at least, of the Plains Indians' spirituality. It's in a way, it's placing your ego on the altar of something larger, the community, the tribe, the earth, and always placing your spiritual connection, your spiritual life, first. That's very important, and that spiritual life only comes into its fullness in relation to all the people that you're surrounded with. That would be your tribe. That would be all the animals and the trees and the rivers and the sky and the mountains, everything around you. So coming into right relationship with all those beings. And then practicing the giveaway. Like you were talking about, I think, earlier, about how we can, in our culture, we can amass many, many toys, many, many things. In fact, we have to go out and get storage spaces to store all the stuff that we can't keep in our own huge houses. Now that's totally antithetical to the giveaway. The giveaway in Native culture, when a person feels like their connection to Great Spirit has been interrupted, compromised, weakened, they hold a giveaway. They invite all their friends and relatives to come over to their house, and they lay out all their possessions on the front and say, take what you will. So they give it all away, and so that those things won't function as a barrier between themselves and spirit.
Why that's a powerful message to me, Flynn, is the fact that people don't seem to understand that you don't have to hoard and hold on. In fact, I remember there was a particular guest I had several years ago who was a practicing Zen Buddhist out of Chicago, and she was remembering a Buddhist precept of, once in your life, you should give everything you have away. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
And it is, but the thing is that this day and age, we're kind of, as you were talking about earlier, about holding things on to the point that we're storing them, is that we lose that ability to trust in the, I guess, mystical way that life gives as you're giving to the world. And I would describe with people that there's a really interesting vacuum, and this was one of the studies I even discovered along my readings back in the 80s and early 90s, is they call the vacuum effect. And I realized I just decided to do it. You know, rather than selling something I wanted to get rid of, I would just go and find somebody and say, here, I just want you to have that. It's interesting how things would replace themselves without effort. I couldn't figure that one out. But that's the idea, as I began to see that spirit and spirituality show you that it's abundant, that you're really never without. You know, and in a day and an age, especially in an economy where everybody's worried about jobs and whether or not they can stay afloat, the truth is this is the best time to learn how to open those hands and just release and trust and just take action and walk the path. Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know if I practice that myself. You know, sometimes I feel like the old mouse. You know, I live in this beautiful house and surrounded by these beautiful meadows and mountains, and I'm pretty comfortable in a lot of ways. But we can get entrapped in what we own, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard the story 1,000 times. Like, I don't know, the more money you amass, the more fearful you become that you're going to lose that money. And instead of bringing happiness, it brings misery because you're just constantly worried about what the stock market is doing, and this and that and that. All these things that you ultimately have no control over. So another aspect of the giveaway that I think is really critical to it, and that we see in the story, is that we're giving it away to those less fortunate than ourselves, those that are suffering. There's a key line in the book where I'm telling the story about during the early 80s when Native people were under a great deal of stress by the incursions of white people into their territory. Two Native warriors went to an elder and said, we're not sure which way to walk, whether we should walk the medicine way or the warpath way. Tell us, what is your medicine? You know, this was a respected medicine man. And he said something to the effect that as if you live in a society where only one person, say you're in a group of 10 and only one person is not connected to spirit and the way of the medicine way, the society can still stay healthy. But once it gets over 2 or 3 people that aren't living the way of the giveaway and the way of helping their brothers and sisters who are suffering or in need, then the society becomes ill and is in danger of collapse. And I know that there are thousands upon thousands of people in our culture that are helping other folks, and these are the people that we never hear about. But the general paradigm of our culture is to look out for numero uno, look out for ourselves, and to secure our own life against what we view as a threatening world, potentially hostile world, rather than a gifting, abundant world that is constantly giving away.
Now, when you put together your vision quests, what's the average age of people who actually seek out your help?
It's actually gone up over the years.
Really?
It's more people in the midlife range, so like 35 to 55, I'd say, roughly speaking. Although there are still some young folks that come out, and I run one program for a college, but it's a lot of people that are in that midlife transition, as you were alluding to before, and many of these people are, like you were saying, are people that have been doing this job for 20, 25 years, and it's not feeding their soul in any way. Mm-hmm. And so they want to find out. They want to renew their connection to spirit and soul, and from that connection, maybe find a new path, a new line of work, something where they can put their whole self, their whole being into what they're doing, and not just a part of themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important for people to know here, Flynn, that when you actually do this vision quest, is you bring something up that I think is vitally important that a lot of us try to overlook. And just quickly, there was a woman that I knew a few years ago who decided to find Christ. Mm-hmm. So I guess call it reborn again. I don't know what the case would be, but she was finding her religion in her life. Yep. And so a few months go by, and we were into a conversation one time, and she says, I've been going to church every Sunday, but I just don't feel any happier. And I asked her, I said, well, what made you think going to church would make you feel happier? She says, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do, is that you go to church, pray to God, you find your religion, you're supposed to be happy? And I said, well, what's bothering you? She says, well, there's just some things that I'm not very happy about. And I said, well, like what? And she didn't really want to go into detail, but I think what was happening possibly is she was beginning to go into herself and see those dark areas of our soul that a lot of us, I think, when we try to find religion, if you will, try to run from and hide and pretend doesn't exist. Yep. The truth is, when you do this vision quest, these people are actually, in a way, forced to go in, see that, recognize, and love that element because that's who they are. An interesting thing is, for instance, in one of the Star Trek movies where there's this guy releasing everybody from their pain, and Captain Kirk says, I need my pain. But there's a lot of truth to the fact that we need to love those skeletons in our closet because ultimately the skeleton is within us. Yeah,
that's true. And as you know, if we don't embrace that part of ourselves, we project it outwards, right?
Right.
And we turn other people into the evil ones or the evil country. There's a line in Leonard Cohen's song about how it's the crack in us that let the light in. It's the wounded parts of ourselves that let the light in. And on the Vision Quest, what I say over and over again is that our gifts are going to be found in the wound, how we've come to terms with that wounded part of ourselves, the resources that we draw on, and the wisdom that we draw on from that encounter with those difficult places, those dark places of ourself. There's often too much emphasis, especially in the so-called New Age, of just going to the light,
right,
and forgetting all about shadow. And when you just go for the light like that, you cast a huge shadow, let me tell you. But you may not be aware of it.
I found it funny because there's a few hippie friends here and there, especially when movies such as What the Bleep came out, and there was the other one, The Secret. And they were just praying and lauding this thing, and I said, no, what you're enjoying the most about this is that you think you can sit around on your ass and God's just going to give you everything, just as you thought for the last 30, 40, or 50 years you've been alive. The truth is that's not how it works. It takes work.
That's the truth. It takes a lot of work, a lot of very hard work. And Jumping Mouse is working hard.
You better believe he is, because the buffalo is just one of a couple of other characters that actually help him on his way. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the key element, just to let viewers, listeners hear about the story is that the buffalo is lying there sick and dying, and the buffalo says that my medicine tells me that the only thing that will heal me is the eye of a mouse. Well, of course, little mouse becomes very frightened when he hears that initially, but then he goes back to the buffalo and he says, I can't let such a magnificent being die when I have the capacity to help him heal. And so he goes back to the buffalo and he says, Brother Buffalo, I am a mouse, and you can have one of my eyes. And as soon as he says that, one of his eyes flies out of his head, and instantly the buffalo is healed. So as soon as we let go of, as soon as we make that sacrifice, that self-sacrifice to help another being that's ill, medicine arises. Healing medicine arises when we reach out to help those that are less fortunate than ourselves.
Now, that's an interesting point, because when you take a look at religious institutions, and it's not to pick on them, but churches, for instance, community churches, now you have, your little country churches that seem to be closer to the mark than just your regular community churches. What I mean by that is, I remember a friend of mine who had went through a divorce, was part of a community church, and apparently it seemed everybody in the church favored her husband over her because she became kind of scorned, if you will. And I thought, what the hell kind of religion are you guys practicing here that you're going to cut somebody off at a point they can use you the most? I didn't realize that there was a credential going on here. But, that's the time to really evaluate the direction that you're going and the people that you're around, and are they nurturing you to that higher plane that you're looking for?
Yeah. No. Or are they pulling you down?
Exactly. A lot of people tend to do that too. But it's really amazing that when you take that courageous journey, that hero's journey, that after a while you'll become almost immune to situations like that, because it's like you're saying, I've got better things to do.
I agree that that's true. I think once you set foot on the spiritual path, it's really hard to turn back. Mm-hmm. But I also think that it's easy to be tempted sometimes off of it, because you don't know you have no idea where you're going. It's a leap into the unknown when you're on that spiritual journey, and we all can become frightened and fall back away from it a little bit, and then Spirit comes along and nudges us back on to the path. Hopefully, anyway.
Now, Flynn, if you can, describe a story through your vision quest of someone who had, I guess you'd consider it a remarkable transformation from what their life was to the realization of how they discovered their authentic selves and what that moved them toward.
Sure. Well, the story that comes first to mind is the story I tell in the book. I'm trying to remember what I call the gentleman in the book. I know it's
We'll call him the next jumping mouse.
Ben, I think. Let's call him Ben.
Okay.
And Ben was, let's say, mid-50s, 55-ish man who had pretty much sacrificed his spiritual life to his work life, and was a self-described workaholic, working many, many hours a week, and a really good man. In fact, he was a nurse. He was a good, loving, caring man with a huge heart, but he kind of shielded that heart a little bit, because you know how it is to be a man in our culture, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to put up that facade of strength and toughness, and he had that a little bit, especially since he was a weightlifter. Mm-hmm. So he was built and energetic. And before he set out on the quest, I asked everybody what their intention is. And I remember that part of his intention was to connect with his joyful child. He felt like he had sacrificed joy to work. So he went out and he had this amazingly beautiful vision quest. He was. I remember one element in his story. He was sitting under a pine tree one day, and he was thinking, "Boy, I'd really like to see an eagle. That would be really inspiring if I see an eagle." And lo and behold, and this is the truth. I'm not making this up. Okay, an eagle feather comes floating down right in front of him. And he looks up into the top of the tree, and there's an eagle. And as soon as they make eye contact, the eagle just lifts off and flies off. But there, he found the eagle feather. And I sometimes tell a story. It's called the Firebird, and it's a Russian folktale. And in that story, there's a hunter riding through the woods one day on his horse of power, and he sees this beautiful golden feather laying on the road, on the path in front of him, and he's like, debating whether or not to get down and pick it up, and his horse tells him, well, you better not. If you do that, you're going to certainly know trouble. And the young hunter thinks, well, I don't need any more trouble, but then he says, oh, what the heck? So he jumps off the horse and he scoops up the feather and he brings it back to the king. And it's a feather from the burning breast of the Firebird. And Ben felt like when he picked up that feather, he was picking up his passion, his own passion that had been denied and repressed and sacrificed to work. And basically his whole vision quest became a celebration of the joyful child within him. He just went out there and he played and did things that he hadn't done in many, many years. Mm-hmm. And I like his story too because it also has elements of the giveaway in it, because while he was out there, he carved gifts for all the loved ones in his life. Mm-hmm. And he even, for himself, he made this beautiful walking stick, and with a removable cap in the shape of an eagle. And what he put in the hole of that cap, of that stick, was poems that he had written. Now Ben has never written a poem before in his life, mm-hmm. but this quest and all these synchronicities that were happening, all these connections with spirit, awakened his imagination and allowed him to write poetry and to create all these beautiful things. And when he came back off the quest, he was shining. He was glowing. He was so ecstatically happy. He just had a beautiful quest.
Fascinating. I think what's really marvelous, too, about the Vision Quest is that here you get these people outdoors. Technology is hopefully nowhere to be found, especially with cell phones. We all seem to be disconnected with those these days.
Yeah.
But that you have the element of being out there and really, truly, not just surrendering, but realizing, as Ben had realized, that when you ask, you shall receive. Mm-hmm. And it's really quite amazing how that works in life, that you're always given everything that you really need. Yeah. You know, and we always seem to think that it's the things that we want that we're not getting, that we don't believe in a philosophy like that. But it's really quite amazing how all this works when you begin to align yourself with spirit. This must be fascinating work for you to be able to work with people, as well as the transformations that you have for yourself.
It's beautiful work. I love it. And just to witness things like stories like Ben and hundreds of other stories like that, it's a real honor to be a guide for them, to help them have such powerful experiences and witness the transformations that take place. And of course, you're right. It works both ways. It works on me too. The work just opens my heart even wider and wider as I sit in circle and I hear these stories of unimaginable pain that some people bring out on the quest, and that they're just going out and just throwing themselves on their knees to spirit for healing. And it's an honor to witness their courage and to hear their stories when they come back off. Their stories of magic and beauty and truth and transformation.
And it's really marvelous for people to experience that they can be authentic, and that's really more than okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most powerful things about the experience, to tell you the truth. Because before the quest begins, we do a lot of work in circle and counsel. And part of that is people get an opportunity to tell their life story. And how often have you gotten to tell your life story in a safe, sacred place? And that in itself is a very, very healing and powerful experience. People really open up. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say to me the night before they go out on their actual solo vision quest, I feel like I've already been on a quest and come back. You know, so much healing takes place in the 3 or 4 days that we spend together as a small tribe doing this work. It's amazing to witness.
Well, that I certainly can believe. Now, would it be fair to say, let's just kind of use a perspective here for the listeners, that you could call yourself a spiritual leader? Okay. Now, this group...
I prefer guide, but...
Guide. Well, we could say guide, too. There's an importance behind this that I wanted our listeners to understand, because of what I've read in your book, Journey to the Sacred Mountains, what we're talking about here today, and the realization of what it is to, I guess, have... I would consider you to be an authentic, genuine guide. And this is why I mean this, is because when a person who may feel in pain, feel disconnected, feel lost, as they go to seek someone, anyone, who can help them kind of get back that really cool vibe, if you will, that you can tend to run into leaders that like to sit like they're preaching on the mount, and if you don't follow their way, then there's something wrong with you. Well, there is, because that's why you're there in the first place. Yeah. But as you had mentioned, that as you bring these groups together, that you experience elements of yourself. So it's literally as though the group is mirroring a lot of aspects of you. And what I think I liked about what you said just not too long ago is that you feel you get as much from the group as you give to the group. And you can... I get really tired of these pulpit gurus, so to speak, I guess is what I'm saying. I mean, this is a way that you can find yourself really in search of who's authentic that will take you on the journey that you're really looking for. Well, I think maybe that's why I preferred guide to leader. Right. Because that's how I see myself, as a guide, not a leader. I'm not really dispensing any way, you know, that this is the right way and this is the only way. That's the province of the old mouse in our story, right? Right. He's the guy that says, my way, or you're bad, you're evil, you're a heretic, or whatever, you know? There's no other way. That's not that's not the way I do it at all. The most, as you know, the most powerful thing that human beings can do with each other is listen with an open heart. And that's what my wife and I do when we sit in council and we hear people sharing from the depths of their pain and their joy. We listen with our hearts, and that's the part that when I'm in the middle of one of these programs, man, my heart is broken open. You know, all the armoring that may fall into place around it is just pushed away, and it's just witnessing another human being on the journey, you know, on seeking their truth. And it can't help but change you when you witness that, and you witness the courage of some people. Let me tell another story. I mean, just an intro. One year there was a woman who I almost didn't think she was a good candidate for a vision quest because she has so many physical problems that her doctor recommended that she stay inside her apartment all the time with an air purifier on and don't go outside because she had so many allergies, you know, to nature and everything, and to the sun. And here it was. This vision quest was in the heat of August, and she had the courage to undergo something like this. It's just, I just had tremendous respect for her, and she made it, and she had a powerful quest, and
reconnected her with the natural world and overcame the fear that others were instilling in her, that she couldn't go out into nature.
What I really enjoyed about the book Journey to the Sacred Mountains is how you thread the story of Jumping Mouse with different philosophy throughout the book, and that you realize the shadow of ourselves is a great side of ourselves, and if we could take that hero's journey to have the courage to say, yes, that was what I did, and that is who I am, and that you want to forgive that part of yourself as well as love it, you really start sitting in the driver's seat of your life and realizing, hey, things aren't so bad. There isn't too much I can think of that can't be worked out.
Yeah. I mean, just think of how much energy we spend, lose, just by trying to repress all those so-called negative emotions or dark energies, the shadow. It's really depleting. And depleting from our full access to our emotions and our connection with each other and the natural world.
Flynn Johnson, I want to thank you for joining us here on the program today. Is there a website people can find out how maybe they can find their own way to a vision quest with you?
There sure is, and thank you very much for interviewing me, Daniel. I enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely.
It's www.questvision.org.
www.questvision.org.
Yeah, thanks for the dots.
Yeah, you gotta put those shadow things in there. It may be a dot, but it's a valuable thing there.
Yeah, it won't get you there.
I don't do much as a dot, but when I do, boy, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, really.
The book is Journey to the Sacred Mountains. It's awakening your soul in nature, which all of us should do at least once a week, anyway. Flynn Johnson, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you, Daniel.
You bet.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. Be sure when you take your vision quest to find yourself looking for our website at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter and visit us at our blog where we will archive our shows, where you can enjoy them at your convenience and share with others. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.